So I'd like to introduce you to this morning's speakers. First of all, serving as the interviewer, Dean Daniel Pullin. Daniel has been at Neely for 3 years now and has experience as a dean for 9 years. He's very much a visionary leader, and he's currently working on the 5-year strategic plan for the Neely School. He's been a great leader and champion in showcasing Neely's excellence and ambition. Daniel will be interviewing our special guest of honor, Scott McClelland, the president of H-E-B Food and Drug Store. And as you're listening to the dialogue today, if you'd like to ask a question, we have some notepads on your table. You could just jot down the question. At 8:30, students are going to run around and grab those questions, and then we'll make another round a little bit later. So, since we've been talking about rankings, I want to make sure you are all aware that H-E-B was named as America's top grocery retailer by consumers in 2019. Let me give you a brief background on Scott McClelland. And I have to say, on a personal note, that I'm very excited to be introducing Scott today because I have followed the strategies of H-E-B for a long time now, for over 3 decades. Part of the reason H-E-B has been front and center in my mind is that I lived in San Antonio while I was working on my dissertation in strategic management in the 90s. That's the headquarters of H-E-B. And I also happened to be married to a longtime employee of H-E-B, my husband Mike, who worked alongside Scott during his early years in the corporate office. Scott has been at H-E-B for 31 years. He's been president of H-E-B since 2017. Scott, I have to say that one of the key pieces of advice that I give to my students is that a good strategy not only articulates what a company is going to do and should do, but it also considers what it should not do. And this is a concept that's key to strong strategic decision-making. There's a concept called staging and pacing. And H-E-B has always cropped up in discussions in my class as one of the few companies in the world that is an expert in staging and pacing. Without giving away Scott's punchline, as he outlines H-E-B's future strategic plans, and this is, of course, is quite public knowledge, but H-E-B has staged the heck out of coming to the Dallas-Fort Worth market. And their pace has been quite deliberate and, frankly, very, very slow. While H-E-B bought property in the DFW market decades ago, emergent strategic opportunities cropped up in the 90s to move to the Mexico market, in the 2000s to move to the Houston market. And both of those decisions prompted H-E-B to deploy their resources in those markets, achieving significant market share success in a short period of time. And all the while, we here in the DFW market have been awaiting their move to this area. And I'm excited to see that H-E-B now has a deliberate strategy. They're taking it, and Scott McClelland is a major part of that vision. He's helped us guide that. He has helped to guide that vision of growth through his 3 decades at H-E-B. And as a result, H-E-B currently has 420 stores plus and over $32 billion in sales annually. So Scott is known throughout much of Texas as the H-E-B guy. One of his earlier positions was running the Houston division, where he is truly the local face of H-E-B. And has been seen in TV commercials with other celebrities, such as J.J. Watt, Deshaun Watson, Jose Altuve, and others. Prior to H-E-B, Scott worked at Frito-Lay. He serves on several boards and co-founded an education-based nonprofit called Good Reason, which focuses on improving education for the students in Harris County in the Houston area. He received his bachelor's degree from USC and graduated from Harvard's Advanced Management program. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott McClelland.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Carter, and thanks for all that you do to lead at the Neely School of Business. She's really a remarkable faculty member, incredible steward of one of our most reputational programs, and I think just emblematic of the type of talent that I have the great fortune to work with each and every day. So thank you. I also love this breakfast for a lot of reasons. And I think you've heard, if you've come to this series before, you've heard about our very intentional approach to building a business school for the rest of the 21st century. And I think business schools and really higher education writ large, you really need to operate at the intersection of the academy and industry. And I think that's such a big part of the special sauce that's really distancing Neely in increasing rates, from our competitors, because we sit in a marketplace that is an economic miracle in so many ways. Fourth largest metro in the country, arguably the fastest growing metro in the country. And so it's convening community and conversations like we're doing here today that really distinguish this business school, from really all others. And the ability to convene community is made possible by that intentional intersection with some of the most amazing companies and leaders in the world. And so I'd like to recognize a few of those, our sponsors for the Tandy Executive Speaker Series. Certainly, it goes without saying, our platinum sponsor, Frost, just remarkable in every way, such a great steward of what we're trying to do here at TCU, such a great employer for so many of our students. Our gold sponsor, Fort Worth Business Press, thank you for, communicating and getting the narrative of goodness out of the Neely School of Business and into the marketplace. Our silver sponsors, Balcom Agency, who's just done some great work with us over the years, Lindbeck, and then a first-time sponsor, a new sponsor, the really amazing folks at Esri, who are a big part of our top 15 supply chain program and really keeping us on the cutting edge of what's possible in that field. And then amazing, long-time, loyal folks for Acme Brick, Dunaway, and the amazing attorneys at McDonald Sanders. Collectively, thank you for allowing us to make conversations like this possible. Please join me in thanking our sponsors today. And so I'm so excited to have this conversation, Scott. Everybody obviously knows the brand. Everybody's been longing for the brand in our neighborhoods. And what you do is so important, right? Bringing people together around food and meals and nutrition and nourishment is a big part of how relationships get built and how health and wellness gets propagated across society. So it's a great topic at just the right moment. So everybody's heard of HEB. But I don't know if everybody really understands this incredible history. So if you could just take us back in time and tell us just a little about the origins and how we got where we are today.
Sure. Well, HEB is privately held. We're owned by the Butt family. Charles Butt is the primary owner, and he's been running the company since I joined the company in 1990. But as you go back in time, it was his grandmother that founded HEB in 1905 in Kerrville, Texas. Her husband had tuberculosis, and his doctor said you should move to Kerrville, which is filled with cedar trees. So if you have a respiratory ailment, why would you go there, for heaven's sakes? And so he moved there, and he never worked another day in his life. They took their $60 savings, they bought a credit line, and they opened up a grocery store on the first floor of their two-story house. And it did very well. So they thought they'd open a second store, it went out of business. They opened a third store, it went out of business. They opened a fourth store, went out of business. They opened a fifth store, went out of business. Now in Major League Baseball, if you bat 1 for 5, that's called the Mendoza line, a 200 batting average, and you don't stay in the major leagues very often, and I think we were lucky that they didn't decide to do something else. But they opened their sixth store in Del Rio, right on the border, and to think about it, back in the early 1900s, who wanted to live in South Texas? I mean, there wasn't air conditioning, it was hot, there weren't very many people, and our strategy was kind of to build where people didn't want to go. Del Rio, Eagle Pass, Laredo, and then they went to the Rio Grande Valley and they moved the headquarters to Harlingen. And so over time, we built up an infrastructure of stores that has become very efficient at distribution and difficult for others to penetrate into. And today, as you said, 425 stores only in Texas, and not all parts of Texas, as you well know, and northern Mexico.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay. Well, so as we go from 425 to hopefully 426 in my neighborhood, and
Quickly.
everybody's right. You just got to spill the beans, right? Tell us, when can we expect to have a store in our neighborhood?
I was with Stephen Budd last night, who oversees Central Market, and a number of years ago, we're having a big Central Market meeting in a room like this, and they were waiting for us to announce that we were going to go to Dallas. And so someone stood up in the audience and said, I just have 2 questions. When and where? And our CFO, who is quite a character, he said, it was 1968 in the back of an Impala. And
I think that's a first for the Tandy Executive Speaker Series.
Which has gone down in the history of HEB as one of the all-time funny stories. So, our first 2 stores, and here's the thing about Charles Budd, and being privately held. You start to think about culture and words you would describe our culture, and there are a bunch, but one of them might be paranoid. Like we're 1/17th the size of Walmart. Amazon is 45 times bigger than us. Kroger is 6 times bigger than us. Like when Walmart first announced they were coming to Texas, we're like, how are we going to survive this? They're so much bigger than we are. And basically, if you put this in war terms, we decided to fight a war like the Vietnam War, and it was guerrilla warfare. We did stuff that a big national competitor couldn't, wouldn't, or didn't. And we knew we had an advantage because as Texans, we eat differently than people in Arkansas, and we live differently. We're all Americans, we eat pizza, we eat hamburgers, but once you get beyond that, it differs a lot. I grew up in Southern California. I never ate a brisket until I moved to Texas. And then I found out it was a religious experience, right? Like you buy a brisket and a bag of charcoal and a 24-pack of beer. Step 1, open a beer. Step 2, charcoal. Step 3, drink a beer. And like 12 hours later, as best you recall, that brisket tasted pretty darn good. So anyway, one of the things about being paranoid is like we study things. So like, ready, aim. Can I pull the trigger? No, aim. And so, as you said, we've amassed real estate here for quite a bit of time. And while if it were up to me alone, I might have been here earlier, we wanted to make sure that we had the best format because this is Walmart's biggest market in the United States. And we went into Houston. When I got to Houston, we had an 11 share. Today we have a 44 share. My guess would be is that Kroger is not going to welcome us with open arms, so we're going to have to be good at what we do. So our first 2 stores will be in Plano and Frisco. We've announced we're going to go into McKinney after that. But for somebody who studied the state and studied the growth in Dallas blows my mind. And so oftentimes when people say, would you build an HEB? I'll be in Huntsville, and a little lady from a small town will say, would you build a small town? I'm like, honey, if you could just have 2 more kids, I think we could get there. We're that close. But I can't use that story up here because the population growth. My goodness, I was up in Harper's Trace a couple weeks ago, looking at some real estate we have and just looking at the growth that's up there. And we've had such good results in our store that's out in Hudson Oaks near Aledo that's done well. And so we're coming. Be patient. But go have a couple more kids anyway. Why not?
You mentioned that brisket is a religious experience, which is fact.
Yes.
Right, that's fact.
It is.
What's also religious is sort of the evangelism of your customers, right? And the incredible loyalty and enthusiasm that you've engendered over the years. How do you build a brand that really evokes those kind of real emotional responses?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we work really hard on is to the extent that someone has an emotional relationship with you, it begins to, and people will refer to my HEB. Like I've gotten some letters from a customer in San Antonio who's like, I'm so mad at that HEB at I-10 in De Zavala. I'm never going back there again. From now on, I'm only going to go to this HEB at I-10 in Wurzbach. I'm like, that's the kind of loyalty. Like, okay, sorry, we'll fix that for you. But I think there are a series of things that we look to do. One is if I were to kidnap you and take you to 3 Walmart stores in 3 different cities, and then once you got inside, ask you what city we were in, they merchandise for the average American. And I think we know this. Look, there's nothing average about Texas. And what's interesting, though, is that not only do people in Fort Worth eat, or Texas eat differently than people in New York or California, people in Fort Worth eat differently than people in Houston. And frankly, there will be people on one side of Fort Worth that will eat differently than the other side based off of your ethnicity, your income, and your education level. And so we tailor every store to the demographics of the people who shop it. And it's interesting when I'll run scan data and look at, for instance, the best-selling salsas in one store versus another, that the overlap between the two is relatively minor. And so if you put the same stuff in every store, you're out of stock on a bunch of items, and then you dust the other items. But if you tailor it so that people begin to think, oh, this store speaks to me. So here's an interesting story. Our first store that we're going to open is going to be in Plano. Plano has about a 25% South Asian population. We're good at merchandising to Hispanics. I think we do a pretty good job with African Americans. But when it comes to South Asians, probably not our sweet spot. I happen to love Indian food. So I was talking to my VP of marketing up here, and I said, so tell me, what have you learned about Indian food? He goes, I don't like Indian food. I'm like, say what? He goes, yeah, I just don't. I said, well, what don't you like? He goes, well, I've never eaten it, but I don't like it. I'm like, dude, you can't not like something, that you've never had. So I put 10 people together. We go down to Houston, which has a large South Asian population. We go to a restaurant for a big dinner. The owner is a friend of mine. She walked us through all the food. The next day, we went to a Hindu temple, spent the morning in a Hindu temple where they feed 1,500 people a weekend. We went to an Indian grocery store where I've gotten to know the manager. He walked us through the entire store. And then we went to someone's house who was Indian. She made us lunch. We looked in her refrigerator. We looked in her cabinets. And that's really the best thing that I think we get to do at H-E-B is spend time with people who don't look like us or aren't of the same income level of us, because the way in which people approach life is different. And so you just become a student in the curiosity piece. So that's a long answer to your question, but we're coming. And I promise, because we got steel up, and then, based off of how well we do, and this is what happened to me in Houston. I went down to Houston. Our first 3 stores were big successes. My 4th store, not very good. I didn't pick a great location. So then I got put in timeout for like a year or two. And you're only as good as your last store at H-E-B. And so one of the things I've done is to make sure that our real estate is all A-plus locations, because I want to build a bunch of stores, because I think this market we have the potential to do well in. But I'm not so confident to think that it's going to be easy. It's going to be hard.
Yeah. Well, you didn't mention Fort Worth yet, so.
Yeah, we've got. Well, Harper's Trace is right up the road from here, so
true.
we're close.
It's not far.
Yeah,
not far.
Exactly.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about Walmart. Can you walk us through kind of the broader competitive landscape, including some digital competitors,
Sure.
Amazon and others?
Let me start with bricks and mortar. So there are 2 basic philosophies in grocery stores. The 2 philosophies are you're a high-low player. So if you think about Kroger, Randall's, Albertsons, high shelf prices, they use a loyalty card to target promotional offers to you or offer you discounts on gas to make you feel like you're saving a lot of money. But if you look at Tom Thumb, their prices are 24% higher than H-E-B with the card. If you look at Kroger, their prices with the card are 11% higher than H-E-B. If all you do is shop the ad, you can do pretty well. Then they're everyday low price players. So Walmart, Aldi would fall into that. They just do everything they can to strip the cost out. So if you go into a Walmart today, one of the things you'll notice is they're pulling out their regular check stands, putting in almost all self-check stands in an effort to lower their operating expenses so that they can have lower prices. So those are the 2 fundamental. We operate as an everyday low price player, but one of the things that we'll work hard on is finding some interesting reason for you to want to come. Hopefully it's a new product that you haven't seen. We came out with a brisket queso a year ago. So I don't know if anybody's tried this or not. So you think about a tray, and in the 2 corners of the tray are yellow cheese and white cheese, and in the other 2 corners are pico and brisket. And you put it in the oven or on the grill for 10 minutes, and here's the magic. You stir it after 10 minutes, and when you stir it, you can say, hey, I made this, even though you really didn't do anything. We sell $1 million a week of this brisket queso. Can you imagine? And we put, so the other ingredients, we put a little bit of crack cocaine in it, but that's besides the fact that we put in. But anyway, those are the kinds of things like I can only find the fresh tortillas there. So that's on the brick and mortar side. So then what happened is, we read about, we've all seen what Amazon did to the book business, like, or what used to be the book business, because now you either buy it from Amazon or you get it on Audible, right? So we hear that they're going to go into groceries, and like, oh no, this is not. We just survived Walmart and figured out how to compete. Like for 20 years, I would pray every morning, dear God, please don't let Walmart squish me like a bug. They're so much bigger than us, right? And then we kind of figured it out how to do it. So now here comes Amazon, and so everybody jumps in the pool on Amazon, and then to complicate matters, here comes COVID-19, and no one wants to leave their house. And so if you think about it, when you shop at H-E-B, you're free labor for me. When you order online, I'm now free labor for you. So if you just do the basic math on this, so if you pay somebody $17 an hour and it takes an hour to pick your groceries, now I'm investing $17 in that order in a business that in general across the industry has a 1% net income. Like, wow, that's a big low. So you have to re-engineer what your profit model begins to look like and how. And one of the things that if you start to subsidize your e-commerce business with your brick and mortar business, then you've got to start to take your prices up on the shelf, which then allows someone like Aldi who doesn't do e-commerce the ability to be the low price leader. So like, how do you do all it's, people go, you're in the grocery business. You have paper or plastic? What do you do? Stack cans on the shelf? And yeah, I do. But it is a little bit more complicated than that as you look. And so looking at building a technology business as a bolt-on to your brick and mortar business has been both exciting because the growth on it has just gone up, but it's also been challenging because culturally a digital culture is different than a brick and mortar culture. I was telling Daniel that 70% of my store managers don't have college degrees. Now they do have masters in common sense. Like, I mean, if you think about COVID for you too, like you don't go to the shelf and pull off a manual and go, chapter 2, the mask controversy. Like, we're making shit up as we went along. Like, these were things, I get a call from the mayor of Cleburne. Anybody? The mayor isn't here, is he? You're from Cleburne? Okay. So the mayor calls me, he goes, I want to let you know that you're going to start senior shopping hours. That's important to our customers. And on the face of it, it looks like it makes a whole lot of sense, right? Like, poor old people, they shouldn't be out and shopping with everyone. Well, we had pulled down our operating hours from 6 a.m. to midnight to 8 to 8 to make sure that if people did get sick, we'd have enough personnel to run our stores. And now the mayor of Cleburne is telling me I'm going to take 2 of those 12 hours and dedicate them to old people, elderly, excuse me. And because I'm now one of those old people. I'm now elderly. And so, I mean, that wasn't going to work for us. And to the mayor of Cleburne, Cleburne was the center of his universe. For me, Cleburne is one of 425 cities I operate stores in. So I said, let's do this. We'll take Favor, which we bought, home delivery of food, and what we'll do is anyone in Cleburne, frankly the state of Texas, who doesn't feel comfortable going to the store, call us at Favor, we'll deliver your groceries for free. And that's a better option than having them have to potentially get sick from another elderly person. And then we're able to use all of our hours. And the other thing I said to him is like, what are you going to do when you have 200 packages of toilet paper and you have people in line for 2 hours to get into the store and the elderly just bought 180 of them? Don't you think your citizens who aren't elderly are going to turn on the elderly? And that isn't going to be pleasant. So anyway, we had to think through stuff like this all the time. And you'd get over one hill and like made it over that hill. And then you'd look up like, oh no, here's another hill as you went through. So the brick and mortar, look, we're all doing e-commerce, frankly, for one reason, because of Amazon. And you can choose, and there are a lot of people that have choose to outsource it. So there's a service, anybody here belong to Shipt or Instacart? So that's one way you can do it. They do a good job. They charge you 16% to go shop for your groceries. But if you're a retailer and they have people that are on their service, who owns the customer, Shipt or Instacart or H-E-B? And what happened, and so they've now stuck themselves between me and my customer. So we made a decision like, that's not a route we want to go down. We'll let them shop in our stores, but we have our own system that we put into place. And frankly, we think that we do a better job. But we are having to re-engineer the profitability on it. So I love to see you in my stores. Come visit me in my stores.
I mean, you had me at brisket queso.
Yeah, there you go.
So one of the things that I've noticed just as a customer is your extensive use of private label. And in our marketing department, in our entrepreneurship program, we're talking a lot about brands each and every day. Walk us through that strategy.
Yeah, so I mean, supermarkets have had private label forever, and typically it's been a low cost, lower quality alternative that, because it didn't have what we call the brand tax associated with, so you think about Frito-Lay Doritos, they've got a whole infrastructure and advertising that goes on to create the demand for the brand. So private label doesn't. Well, first thing, we don't call ours private label, we call it own brand. And one of the things that's interesting about the H-E-B brand is that it always has to be better quality or different from the national brand. So I'll use Bluebell as an example. I worked on this project many years ago that we wanted to come out with an own brand ice cream that was better than Bluebell. Well, like, that's the definition of ice cream in Texas. And so every Wednesday for 3 years, for 4 hours, I would eat ice cream. And I got paid to do it. Like, how good is this job when you think about it? And we could get all the flavors to where on a blind, like if you tell somebody, this is Bluebell, this is H-E-B, which ice cream do you like better? Well, there's a bias that goes into, well, I buy Bluebell, I like. So these were in blind taste tests, and we could win on every flavor except for vanilla. And what that Bluebell does is that they cook their eggs in a way that gives it a custardy flavor, and it took us a long time. For Fritos, it took us 10 years to come up with the quality on Fritos. We hired 6 people away from Frito-Lay to come to us, and the magic on a Frito is that you raise the oil temperature to just below the flash point before you put the cornmeal in to cook them. 10 years it took us to get there. So one of the things we're confident on is, like, our quality is better, but we're always looking for items that are different than. So one other story I'll tell you till we get back to it is our biggest shrink item, shrink is the item as a word for items you have to throw away, in produce was avocados, because they would get bruised, right? Have you ever gotten an avocado home and you cut it open, it has a brown spot, and you're like, can I eat that? No, I better throw it away. So we, squeeze our avocado, like, this one's bad, we cull them. And so we thought, Texans like guacamole, but not very many people make guacamole at home. They wait till you go to a Mexican restaurant. Why don't we take the avocados that have one brown spot, cut those out, and make guacamole out of it? It's now a $60 million business a year for us to make guacamole in the stores. And we have all kinds of different flavors, and so we make it fresh in store. And so the idea is, we start with you, and what is it you eat and you live, and what's interesting to you, and we try to get on the leading edge, not the bleeding edge. So we got into sushi early. We were just beyond the bleeding edge, but in 1991, when I joined H-E-B, we didn't sell sushi. Today we sell more sushi than we do bananas. And if you think about it, as a Texan, that sushi used to be thought of as ethnic food, now it's called lunch, right? And so those are the kinds of things that we do that frankly make our job fun, is you're always on the hunt for, like, what's next? What's a new idea that will, because my dog, I've fed her the same thing every day for her entire life, she's never complained. But if I gave you a tuna sandwich for 3 days in a row for lunch, on the 4th day, you'd like, not tuna again. Like, you're always interested in something that could be different or better, or that's why we're always excited to go see a new restaurant, right? So.
I love it. So culture, right? You've been there for 31 years. You've seen a lot. There's got to be something about the culture that's kept you coming back each and every day.
Yeah, so if you think about it, every company has a culture, even if you don't spend any time on it. Enron had a culture. Obviously, they didn't spend a lot of time trying to cultivate it. And so what happens is the culture evolves into maybe some unanticipated consequences, as it did at Enron. Lots of companies go to work on a mission statement. When I'm giving a presentation, I show this mission statement that's fairly generic. And then I said, like, this mission statement, and then I put it up, and it's for the Dunder Mifflin Paper Company, right? And so lots of companies will go to work on their culture, and it's a mission statement, and this is what we do. And then they stop there. And we work all the time on our culture, because we think that culture can eat strategy, and culture is also a strategy accelerator. So strategy is important. That's why you have a job, right? It helps aim at what you want to do, but from an acceleration standpoint, the ability to get your team behind it and supportive of it. And I guess I'd start with this as an idea. In life, it doesn't matter if it's you, Daniel, or if it's me, or if it's a checker in a store, or if it's one of my store managers. I think everybody kind of wants to make a difference in some way, shape, or form. Like, we want to count. And you think about people who like their jobs the most, they're people who feel like their opinion counts and that they matter. And somewhat out of self-preservation, I was telling Mike Carter, when I joined H-E-B, I'd never worked in a supermarket. First job, I'm running 70 of them. 8 weeks later, my wife goes, how do you think things are going? And I said, if they find out I have no idea what I'm doing here, we're in some deep shit, because that meat just looks red to me. And so what I did in the first year was I'd go around to people and I'd say, hey, if we swap jobs next week and you had my job, what's the first thing you'd do to make your life better? I'd write down notes. And I go to another group and I'd look for commonalities. And what I realized that later when the term came out, like I was doing servant leadership, right, trying to fix things for people. But what you find is everybody has an idea. Like I have 4. 2 suck, 1 probably pretty good, and 1 might be okay. But with 130,000 people, when I go into stores, I'll go to a cake decorator and I'll say, like, what's the hardest thing about your job? What do you not like about your job? And then people come up with amazing ideas. And if you can be a contribution to, now your job goes from being a job to being a calling. So that's one piece. And then secondly, we work hard on being a good corporate citizen and try to invest back in our communities to make them better places to live. And I think our partners, that's what we call our employees, appreciate that and feel like they work for a company that cares. And we don't ask them for money, but you think about what are the things you can give. Well, you can give your treasures, but you have part of your treasures is you can give your time, and they donate back, and they feel better about themselves for making their communities a better place. And so those are kind of the 2 key things. And we focus a lot on, look, we want to pay our people more than we're supposed to. And we're constantly looking at how can we take wages up. We're looking at charging less for groceries and coming up for unique items. And a lot of unique item ideas come from people in the stores, not from some VP. This is interesting. So you take a watermelon. We sell a watermelon for $6. And I lose money on that because I match up to Walmart. And Walmart's 17 times bigger than us. They have economies of scale. Selling whole watermelons, I don't have much future. So somebody in a store, the department manager got the idea is, look, I'm going to quarter these watermelons, and then I'll take my $6 watermelon, and the quarters will add up to $9. And so, and you like a quarter watermelon because if you're in a smaller family, you can't eat a whole, and a quarter watermelon fits in your refrigerator, and a whole doesn't. And so then another department manager said, you know, if I take this quarter watermelon and I slice it like a loaf of bread and I lay it out, now I can get $18 for this watermelon. Because people never underestimate the laziness of the American public. I'm just saying. People will pay for convenience. And so then somebody else said, well, you know, if I take that watermelon, I just get a scoop and I just start scooping watermelon balls, that $6 watermelon becomes $24. And so what we do, because a lot of what gets better gets measured, is we put metrics in place, and we call it merchandising mix. It's like what percentage of your watermelons are in whole and what percentage are in merchandise. And I'll see people pick up 2 packages of watermelon triangles, the slices of bread, and they'll be paying like $14. They could have bought 2 whole watermelons, but because they don't want to take a knife to it, they buy it. And I love those people. I just love them, right? But those ideas didn't come from our VP of produce. They came from some guy with a knife in a store. And God gave me 2 ears for a little reason. That's to listen. And it's been such a blessing to me because I'm not that smart. But I'm at least intelligent enough to know when I see a good idea to write it down, and then I give that person the credit, and they're like, hey, that was my idea.
I love it. I love it. Well, so I love your approach to leadership, right? You're sensing the marketplace. You're listening with both ears. In your career, right, when you're talking to people and you're seeing people progress the organization, what really signifies someone that's really standing out and really fits the culture, the strategy, and has a real opportunity to ascend in the company?
Yeah, I guess there are 4 key things that we look at. And look, the most basic is you have to have good quantitative skills. When you see people top out in their career, it's because they hit their head on the ceiling from a quantitative. We do a lot of data mining to know, because we know what sells by store, by hour, and so looking for items. If you worked for Walmart, you would get a sheet of paper with 24 items to do today, and you'd go do those 24 items, then you'd go buy a 24-pack of Natty Light, and you go home and you drink the whole thing because you hate your job. At H-E-B, what we do is we say, you are the CEO of your store, and there's some certain things from food safety you have to do, but it's up to you to run the best and most profitable store, and you got a lot of data that you can mine to identify how you can make the most money, and so as a result, you own that store. That's one. Second thing that I look for is somebody who's curious, that eating trends change. There's so many items in the store, like can you take an item that people didn't know would be a good seller and find a way to, the term we use is brand build. So how do you create an item that people didn't buy at one point in time? Like we just came out with it. This is a bag chocolate, and it's a piece of banana bread with a pecan on it enrobed in chocolate. It's like the best thing I've ever put in my mouth. Like, you find that item, you demo it, and can you turn that into an item you could sell a couple $1,000s a week, and then we send that out. So curiosity is critical. And good ideas don't just come from us, they come from outside the industry. You're constantly looking for a good idea. My number 2 guy, the guy who runs Houston now for me, he and I have a rule: whenever we go into a store, we don't leave it until we've walked away from one idea that we can steal. When you go to TCU and you plagiarize, you get kicked out. When you go to work at HEB and you plagiarize, you get promoted. I got a 31-year career of doing that. That's 2. Number 3 is you got to be a good communicator. When you run one of our stores, you have between 300 and 600 people who work for you. And they're all shapes and sizes and backgrounds and ethnicities. It's one of the best things about working at HEB is the diversity of the people who work for us. And generally, people don't say, when I grow up, I want to go to work in a grocery store. It's not a destination profession. You end up there because you worked there in high school, or maybe, frankly, you didn't see enough potential in yourself to go to college and do something else. And what we do is we take a lot of pebbles and we turn them into shiny stones. We invest in them and help people be bigger people than they thought they could be. So taking an interest in people's careers and being a good communicator, that's really important. And then, so that's 3. And then the 4th thing I would say is just being creative, and so that goes hand in hand with being curious in terms of what we do. But those are kind of the 4 key things. But the curiosity one, frankly, if anybody here is a student and you're interviewing, is like, if that isn't on the list of whoever you're interviewing with, then you have the potential to go work for a company that's going to get complacent. Because our business looks so much different today, Mike, than when we worked together back in 1990. And it's, basics, low prices, good products, good service, those fall. But in terms of the items we sell, completely different.
I love it. I love it. So for the last 2 years, I've tried to make it a personal point of privilege to not say the word I'm about to say. Mm-hmm. But since HEB has been so proactive, and I think broadly recognized for its expertise in navigating this, talk to us about COVID.
Yeah. So I was running Houston when Hurricane Harvey came, and I always thought that would be the hardest thing I ever did. And the first hurricane that ever came it was 2005. A hurricane came, and the guy that was running Houston with me at the time, he said, "You ever done a hurricane?" "No." "You ever done?" Like, "Well, we better figure this out in a hurry." And so it hit Beaumont, and this was right after Katrina hit. I'll get back to COVID in a minute. So the government came in, FEMA came in, and they just shut down Beaumont and said no one's allowed to come in. Well, I had 9 stores without electricity in 90-degree heat. That's not a pretty picture. We needed to get in and throw stuff away. And these Cajuns that live in East Texas, they're a little stubborn. They weren't going to leave. And so I chartered a helicopter to fly over to meet with FEMA because the roads were closed. They wouldn't meet with me. Like, what are we going to do? Here's what we'll do. So type up we get 3 buses, fill them up with people. We get a Cadillac Escalade. Somebody has a blue light like they used to have at Kmart. We stick it on the top. I type up a letter that says, "To whom it may concern, these buses are authorized by me to enter the Beaumont Port Arthur area to clean out our stores and open them up." Send them over to Beaumont. And they get to the outskirts of Beaumont. The police pull them over. "You aren't allowed to come in." I said, "No, we have a letter." And I said, "What letter?" So they pull out the letter on my letterhead. They look at it and go, "Okay, I guess you can come in." So we got our stores open a week before Walmart, and it made and then we went in and we just gave away ice and gave away water to people who lived there. It made such a difference in our business. So a lot of this you make up as you go along, right? Yeah. The term we use is, look, you got to fake it till you make it. And so we got into this, and when we initially, the CDC, you don't have to be in masks. You need to be in masks. So we ordered 1 million masks from China, and we kept and they kept getting sold out from under us because somebody would pay more. So they flew into LAX. We had sent out a charter plane to bring 1 million masks back so that we could get our people into masks. And the government seized them because they were going to redistribute them out to first responders. Like, well, we're a first responder. So we called someone we knew with the FBI and pled our case with them. And the FBI went over, got our mask release. And I mean, here we are on the other end of a phone, and we're at the high of high, like the masks have landed. The mask got confiscated. The FBI's involved. They're on the plane. We're so happy that we had masks as we went through. But early on, we said we have to do 2 things. We have to make sure that our employees, our partners, and customers feel safe coming into H-E-B, because without customers and employees, we have no business. And secondly, we better find something to put on the shelves. And at times that was challenging. I mean, think about toilet paper. So because we operate stores in Mexico, I mean, we look around the world for products, and we found a toilet paper in Mexico called Vogue that was chamomile scented. Go figure. It was our #1 selling toilet paper because we had no other toilet paper. And the stores were so happy to have it until, look, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, right? I mean, we love this chamomile scented toilet paper until the Charmin showed up. And then stores are like, get this crap out of my store. Like, nobody's buying, like, you just wait. And then we had another shortage and it went. But you just had to be inventive as you went through, whether it was masks, whether it was getting the plexi. So this guy who works for me in Houston, I'd been to a meeting at the medical center, and I said they've got a shortage of PPE, and to include the plastic masks that they have. And my guy goes, plastic? What if we put these acrylic, I mean, you see them everywhere now, but it was his idea that came up with them. And 3 days later, we had them up in all the stores. So like, you just move fast. And COVID's been good for us. Like, I'm not gonna lie, COVID has been good for our business. All the food that goes in your stomach makes a pie chart, right? And normally, we only own 50% of that pie chart. So 2 things happened during COVID. Your stomachs got bigger, and restaurants didn't operate. So we got a bigger piece of a larger pie chart, 1. 2, the government has been very generous with subsidy to low-income customers, which has allowed them to buy more groceries. So they come to us. So look, you wanted to be in the do-it-yourself business, you wanted to be in the Peloton sporting goods business, you wanted to be in the grocery business. I would gladly trade the gains that we have had for not having had to have gone through this, just because of the physical and mental toll that it's played. But you play with the cards you got, and you try to do the best job that you can. And our culture is we're going to be the last to close and the first to open, and we're going to be there. And why do like when the freeze came last year, like, why did our employees come to work? We were going to pay them if they couldn't get to work, pay them time and a half if they do come to work, but is half-time worth it? Go back to what I said earlier about the culture. I think people want to know that they count and that they make a difference. And somehow our partners found a way to get to work, God bless them. And that's just part of what we do. So that goes back into the culture.
No, I love it. I love it. Before we get to the questions that have just been handed to me, I want to ask one final one.
Sure.
You've been very inventive, right? We've talked about innovation a little bit, and that's allowed H-E-B to every year improve its competitive position. Forecast the future a bit, if you will. What's going to change? How are you getting prepared for it? And what might we see as we look 5 and 10 years ahead?
Yeah, I mean, from an invention standpoint, I mean, we're kind of always pressing on edges. Like supermarkets, we talked about private label before, which frankly I think gave supermarkets a bad name because they shortcut quality, and anything you put your name on is going to reflect the brand. So we went to work on that. For a long time, supermarkets looked at that pie chart and said, well, we'd like to get into prepared food. So they would take some meatloaf and some powdered mashed potatoes and some canned green beans, and they go, voila, innovation. But if what you made tastes like crap, like, unless you're really hungry, why would you buy your food at a grocery store? And so we really, shot ourselves in the foot with that, and we've had to dig. We've tried a number of restaurant concepts. I opened up a restaurant in Houston, and we had a James Beard award-winning chef help us with the menu and help us with the operation. But you have to think about, what will the customer give you permission to do? And at the end of the day, when it came to a nicer restaurant, I came to the realization that if I said to my wife, hey, honey, good news tonight, I'm taking you out to eat at H-E-B, that I wasn't going to get lucky. Like, you have to look at where the customer will give you permission to perform. So we found from Sure of Stomach, like, we can do barbecue, and we can win at barbecue, and the customer gives us permission. And frankly, our barbecue is really good. We've worked hard on that. But, but we're always, about every year, something like, we should get into this restaurant. And like, I've tried to do pizza so many times, I could show you the scars on my backside. You have to know what the customer will allow you to do and not allow you to do. We've hit a home run with Meal Simple, which are prepared meals in a tray that we make fresh in store every day. And so early on, when Blue Apron came out in these meal kits, we thought, oh my gosh, this is going to take over everybody. But so we did some study, and we asked 200 people to send in pictures of everything they ate for a week. So we get 1,400 pictures in, we lay them out on the floor in a room like this, and we're looking, and it's like a banana on a plate, a sandwich. And one of the things that we were most struck by, the number one thing was how many people eat off paper plates. How many people in here eat off paper plates? Just raise your hand. Some of you are liars. My staff, 25 people, everybody earns over $100,000 per year. 70% of them eat off paper plates. And so we looked at that and we said, the meal kits, well, if you order in a meal kit, you got to mix it and bake, and like people don't want to do the dishes. So we came out with these meals in trays, and it's been a complete home run for us in terms of what we've done. So I think you're going to see anything that has to do with convenience will win. I think the fact that people are now more interested in eating a variety of different foods. Look, when I grew up, we rotated through, at my house, spaghetti, hamburgers, roast beef, right? My sister, who's 20 years older than I, she's never even eaten sushi. But you think about people today, like, hey, let's go out for Thai food. Like, what's the latest so I think the breadth of what people, and so to demystify it and make it easier to eat, I love Indian food. I just keep thinking Indian food is going to hit at some point in time. Maybe it'll be the next sushi. I don't know. So I think you'll see that. I think you'll see a continuing migration into e-commerce as older people die and younger people move their way up. Is that, I have one daughter that only orders online. I have one daughter who split shops, and my wife only goes into the store. So I think we'll see a slow migration, but I don't think you'll see supermarkets go away. And we've been fortunate over the last 4 years as our in-store growth, our brick and mortar store business has gone up, but our e-commerce business has gone up faster. And I think the thing that will remain the constant going forward is that people that are curious and people and companies with the best people will win. And it doesn't matter what in it, but that's one of the things we really stress. And one of the reasons I'm glad to be here today with you, given the quality of students you have out, is we're always looking for good people. Always. So that's it.
I love it. Well, that's very well said and a comprehensive view as we look ahead. People are still stuck on the brand here. What are the key branding concepts that are the focus of HEB, and what's the role of Central Market in that?
Yeah, so in 1990, I joined the company, and HEB didn't have the best quality image in the marketplace, and that made Charles Butt crazy because he's very competitive. And so he found a grocer in Atlanta, just outside of Atlanta, called Harry Blazer's Farm Fresh Market. And Harry had a supermarket that didn't sell groceries. They just sold produce, meat, bakery, deli, seafood. That was all he sold. And at the time, he did over $1 million a week. And so Charles went to Harry Blazer and he said, I've got a deal for you. I'll give you $1 million if I can send every produce manager from HEB to work in your store for 2 weeks. And he said, well, how many produce managers do you have? He said, well, we have 220 stores. So that'd be 440 man weeks of labor. And they'll work in my store? And he said, yes. And he said, you're crazy. I'll do it, but what do I have to do? And he said, every day you have to talk to them for 20 minutes. And so we would get on, take 25 produce managers at a time. Mike Carter and I went, and you'd have these, at that time, people didn't travel as much, you'd have produce managers who'd never left their town, much left the state, with a suitcase, and their wives would be crying, and we'd ship them off to Atlanta for 2 weeks. And we went to work in this crazy guy's store, and we thought afterwards, maybe we could create an R&D store to test out new ideas. We'll never make any money at it, so we'll just open one. So we opened up one at 38th and Lamar as a complete home run. And here's one of the things I found out over time is, like, here, you guys want HEB. You have Central Market. You guys, like, when am I going to get an HEB? I really want an HEB. In Houston, we have HEBs, but we only have one Central Market. So people in Houston are like, yeah, I know I have HEB, but could I just have a Central Market? Come on. And so what you find is nobody's ever truly satisfied. And the thing about Central Market is it's as defined as much by what it doesn't sell as by what it does, right? To your point. Like, we don't sell Diet Coke. We don't sell any national branded items. We just sell specialty grocery only. And it's hard to be in a bad mood when you're in Central Market unless you don't have any money. But it's, the entire experience starts with fun is what you end up doing. So that's the role that Central Market plays. We also have 2 other formats, both of them in Houston only. One is called Mi Tienda. It's a Central Market with a sombrero. It targets first-generation Latinos. There were 4 of us that built this concept, 3 Latinos, and I was the token white guy. And for 6 months, I got paid to travel to Mexico and Central America and LA and Phoenix and just eat. And we built the concept. We'd see an idea, take a picture, we built it. And so we have that. And then we have a a high-value store targeted towards low-income neighborhoods that has prices that are 15% lower than Walmart, lower than Aldi, but is a store that's 4 times larger than Aldi, has a full meat department, and those stores are really confounding when we put those, and it helps us solve the food desert issue. So those are the different things that we do.
I love it. Another thing that you do is really display and practice corporate social responsibility. Very, very prominent charitable contributions,
Yes.
very deep investment in the community, including our community today, by the way. All the items in the bag, thank you very much,
Sure.
HEB. Please distribute them, take them home with you.
Fight amongst yourself.
Exactly.
Figure out who gets what.
Yeah, it's like Game of Thrones
Yeah,
at
that's it.
8:55 a.m.
But we do, and look, on the one hand, we get a lot of credit for it. We don't do it to get the credit. I mean, to be honest, if our communities do better, more people will want to move to them. And if more people move to them, they're going to get hungry and they're going to need to buy groceries. So there's a strategy behind that. But also, I would say is that, a piece of what we do is we want Texas to be a better place to live. And that doesn't matter if it's for the people who work for us by paying them more and creating a good environment that they want to come to, or for our customers who look forward to going to HEB because they can find items and we can give them more disposable income because we charge less for groceries. Or for our communities, we donate, the last 4 years we've donated 10%, but our corporate commitment is to donate 5% of our pre-tax earnings back into charity because, look, people need it. And one of the areas I'm very passionate about is public education. And when in the state, less than 50% of all third graders read at grade level, yet 65% of all new jobs require a 2-year or 4-year degree, there's a real gap that's there. In the greater Houston area, only 20% of all the kids who go to public school in Houston get a 2-year or 4-year degree within 6 years of graduation. And there aren't blue-collar jobs that exist today like when I was growing up. And so really, the future of our state is going to be predicated on how many people can we get into your university. Because really, a school is nothing more than a manufacturing plant. It takes raw material, it adds value to them, and at the end of high school, that you hope kids are ready to pursue secondary education or be career ready. And that's a big opportunity for our state. And frankly, it's a responsibility that more corporations and more individuals should be paying time and attention to. But a lot of people say, oh, my kid's doing fine. Like, this isn't about your kid, it's about all kids. And our ability to attract the type of industry that we need for our state to be even greater is going to be predicated upon what you do for a living. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Last question. Natural and organic. How are you competing against the Whole Foods of the world?
Yeah, so I thought you were going to ask me to define the difference between the two.
I don't know.
I'm like, thank God you didn't ask that. That one's above my pay grade right there. So, it's interesting. If you think about Whole Foods starts with better for you and then eventually gets around to food as celebration. And if you think about Central Market, they start with food as celebration and then they back into food is better for you. And I think a couple of things you see is, look, there's, whoever heard of eating a gluten-free diet when I was growing up? You didn't even know that existed. And the guy who's my peer that runs Martin, who runs the backside of our business, he's like, I eat gluten-free. I'm like, really? Were you diagnosed with celiac? No, I read some articles about it, and I think I might have an issue. It's one of the things that, people, so it doesn't matter if it's disease state, or if it's perceived better for you. Now, what I find interesting is that people will work hard on, I'm only eating organic and I'm really eating better, and to reward myself, I'm going to go buy a pint of Ben & Jerry's, right? I mean, there's this duality that exists in our head, I'm going to be good, and then I'm going to reward myself. And that makes complete sense. And I do think is that, I have this theory about men losing weight. Men only lose weight if they're sick or they're having an affair. Those are the only two reasons, right? And so if you start to think about eating healthier, is that people are willing to make modifications, but to go all the way to eating really healthy, unless you're sick, you're not going to do it, I don't think. So the challenge is how do you not have people give up taste and flavor, but eat healthier, or play the game called this, not that. Like, oh, I love cheese. Yeah, what? I won't eat a triple cream brie. I'll eat a harder cheese because that's better for me. I'm going to have a sandwich. I really like Baird's white bread. But you know what I mean, on a different bread. So how do you make choices within the realm to help you be healthier? And so we're in the process now, and we think that one of the next frontiers, and I should have talked about this, is healthcare. And so access to how do you look at the relationship between food and health, because there's a big one. And we're now putting our new stores up here, will all have nutritionists in them. And what you can find is, look, you can treat a lot of your disease states and cut back on the amount of medication you have to take by choosing to eat differently. And not whole, like just not boiling a chicken breast and eating a raw potato, or not eating a potato, because I'm eating a raw piece of broccoli. Like, you can find a way to make food taste good. And so that's one of the things that we're off on. But we also have to realize is that, look, there's a huge number of Texans that are just trying to put food on the table. And I hear people all the time say, like, what's the deal with poor people? Why are they fat? Okay, well, have you ever been in a poor person's home to see what they're up against and how they eat at the end of the month? So one of the programs we have for our store managers, when you become a store manager, we give you $62 because that's what a food stamp family will get for a weekly allocation. And we say, go feed your family on this and then tell us how you do it. You're going to eat eggs, you're going to eat ramen, you're going to eat processed meat such as hot dogs or bologna in order to get it done. And you've got to get the calories, and to eat healthy costs money. And so finding a way to democratize the ability to give people access, but also is you find that processed foods oftentimes taste good. So how do you not give up the flavor? And so it's one of those keys we're looking to unlock. But there are a lot of people right now that still just, see the same thing with people going green, like, oh, we should do a lot more in terms of, yes, and there's a portion of the population that's really important, and from just a responsibility standpoint, we should do it. But when your average income is under $40,000 a year and your 40% of your population earns less than 25, they aren't worried about eating green, or eating better for you. And so finding ways to make food that's better for you more affordable and easing your way. Again, I said I got to get into the leading edge, not the bleeding edge, because when you earn 1%, we earn a little more than that, but when on average you earn 1%, you can't afford to make a lot of mistakes and stay in business, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate, first of all, in addition to our shared exemplary fashion sense today, I really think we've had a dynamic conversation.
You made it easy.
Well, it's just always incredible to talk to leaders that drop insights like being dynamically and intentionally focused on running a customer-centric organization, having an acute aware of the competitive landscape today and tomorrow. Understanding concepts that, culture, either you're intentional about it or it will evolve on you. And it can be either a deterrent or it's really a strategic accelerator. The power of being a good corporate citizen and investing in the community and how that broadens your impact as an organization, but also has the opportunity to generate additional returns on investment. Brisket queso. I hope everybody writes that down.
Yeah.
Brisket queso.
Yes.
Pretty powerful. Chamomile toilet paper. I didn't think we'd go there. And never underestimate.
Who thought of that idea?
Know, right?
That's all I can think is like, who do you even... Now, I will say, look, you go down to the Rio... This is how we tailor. So you go down to the Rio Grande Valley. Anybody here from the Valley? Grow up? Okay, so in the Valley, look, when you clean with Fabuloso, which is lavender scented, right? In a lot of African American communities, you clean with pine sol, right? So you look at culturally, there are some differences. So like, how many things can you put lavender? So we have lavender scented toilet paper that we sell in the Rio Grande Valley, and we sell a lot of it. We sell the shit out of it.
I think that's an ender.
That's
everybody.
an ender.
Hey,
How about that?
All right, let's thank Scott McClelland.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have a great day, everybody. Go
Bye-bye.
Frogs.
Take care.